You are joining us for the Roadmap to Runaway Success, How EDI and 3PL Empower Growth. Today, we're going to be talking about the challenges of what sometimes is sudden success. We're going to break down what EDI is and what 3PL is, and then we'll talk about actionable strategies and real-world applications before we dive into a Q&A. I'm excited to introduce you to today's speakers. So first off, we've got Josh Fischer. He's the VP of Product here at Sin7. And we have Dipti Desai. She's the CEO and co-founder of Crstl. And then in the wings, we've got Teva Vogelstein. She is working with us to answer any of your questions that might come in. So having said that, at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A function. If throughout the webinar you do have questions, please don't hesitate. Add those into the Q&A and we'll get to them as fast as we can. And we'll have more time for Q&A at the end as well. With all of that said, we're going to dive in. Josh, do you want to talk to us about our first challenge and scaling without chaos?
Yeah, so I'll kick this off. So first, thanks for joining us today. Dipti and I have been talking about this for months now. Really excited to share this insight with you. I personally, I've been working in this back office modern sales industry for well over a decade now, and this is one of the challenges that I've seen over and over and over again with up and coming brands or smaller businesses who they've found success online. A lot of times, these brands start with, maybe it's somebody that has a passion project, or they have a great idea for a market that they know incredibly well, and they've been successful taking that product to the market using digital tools like, Shopify or BigCommerce or even WooCommerce. Maybe they're selling on Amazon, and they've figured out how to play that game, and they've done it incredibly well. They found their market, a lot of customers, and they get to a point in some cases they get to a point where they've kind of hit a plateau with the market that they've been working to attract. They've found all of the digital customers that they've been trying to find, but they know that there's more out there. And they recognize, if I could just get my products onto as many online marketplaces as possible, or even onto the shelves of big box retailers, there's so many more customers that would benefit from the products that we're creating or we're selling. And the challenge is, a lot of these business owners, they don't know the steps to making that happen. It's new territory for them, and really that's what we want to talk about today. And from my experience, what I've found is these businesses, when they are trying to reach that new market, the market of customers that are coming in through these different sources, there's three things that I feel like those merchants need to start thinking about. First is B2B. So instead of selling directly to the consumer, you have an opportunity to sell to businesses who are already reaching your consumer. The second is EDI, which we're going to talk about in length today. And the third is 3PL, and we'll talk about that at length as well. If you can start to understand EDI and 3PL and how to build those B2B relationships, that will really catapult you into the next level of business. And maybe it's something that you're doing already today. And we have Dipti here, who's been in this space for years, and maybe she'll have some insights for you that will help you accelerate that even further. So Dipti, do you want to tell us a little bit about what EDI is?
Yeah, absolutely. Josh and Lauren, thank you for hosting this. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And it's nice to see some familiar names in the attendee list. So yeah, what is EDI? So EDI stands for Electronic Data Interchange. And if there's one thing about EDI that, if you take away from this conversation, is to know that EDI is not a technology, it is a protocol, right? That distinction is really important because it sort of really separates from what it is versus what is possible with it. I'll use a couple analogies to see if one or either one or both of those help. One analogy we use is think of EDI as a protocol in the same way that the protocols that power email, right, which is SMTP, POP3, and whether, I'm old enough to remember Yahoo Mail, Hotmail for that matter, right, or now Gmail, for example, but they all kind of share that same underlying email protocol, right? Gmail, became for various reasons the de facto standard, but, definitely removed a lot of the pain points that came with, for Yahoo Mail, for example, just from my recollection of using the product, right, it suffered from limited storage or not being so powerful at catching spam, right? But then Gmail came along and removed a lot of those pain points, which was independent of sort of the protocol underlying both, right? Like one could have solved the same problem the other did, but for whatever reason chose not to. But that says really nothing about the protocol, because that really is independent and it's underlying, and all of these user-facing kind of applications are really sort of sitting on top of it, right? Like that's one sort of analogy potentially that might help clarify. The other analogy I use is, think of EDI in the context of a protocol or a standard as you might think of the English language, right? Now, by virtue of the English language adopted by, in varying degrees of fluency, et cetera, but nonetheless, that it has been adopted globally for the most part, makes it so much easier for us to conduct business with each other, right? And even if English is a quote unquote standard language, as we all know, there is so much variation just within the, not just in the United States, but even just in the East Coast of the country or wherever it might be, right? Like there's just so many regional variations. Not to mention sort of the variations that emerge once you sort of look across countries and things like that, right? But if you were to sort of pop in a room somebody who's speaking English from, Australia, from Boston, from South Africa, and Canada, like they will still all understand each other, even if it's the case that the way they're speaking or certain word choice, et cetera, may be different. And that's because inherently as humans, we've potentially, right, like developed a way to normalize in our heads, like, oh, if the person from Australia is saying mate or whatever, like maybe in the US, we don't use that, but we kind of get what they're trying to say, right? So that's a little bit of how to think about it. And so even though then EDI is a standard, and it helps to an extent, standardize business communication between two or more entities. Depending on, say, for example, whether you're Walmart or Target, you may have your own implementation of EDI, right? Because it's influenced by your business process, it is influenced by the people designing the systems and their architectural choices or whatever it may be. But it goes without saying that there will be, and there are, differences between how these different retailers, et cetera, choose to implement. Right. And in the context of retail, obviously EDI has broad applications in various industries outside of commerce. We are focused obviously on the commerce and retail space, where it helps to automate and standardize, right, kind of that whole, what the jargon is, order to cash workflow, which is really, the B2B orders, the invoices, all of the advanced ship notice and other things that go with it, like the GS1 label and things like that. So that's a little bit about kind of how we, think about EDI. And therefore at Crstl, our focus is really to sort of separate the standard from the value to the customer and the possibilities for the customer, right? Like we don't think that one hinders the other, because whether, by the same token, we leverage and build our own APIs or leverage others' APIs. We use AI plenty, right? There's aspects of that in our product. And so we think that for us, like EDI is a standard, and kind of whether we marry it with, whatever kind of technology which is suitable to make a customer experience possible and much better than what they thought was possible, that's really the relevant piece. And so, so just wanted to sort of share that, because, many years ago when I started working in this space, some people used to be like, oh, EDI is like fax. And I used to scratch my head, and then, I would go research and kind of come back a little bit like, I kind of think I understand what they're saying, but it doesn't quite compute, right? So, but over the years of, working in this space, we found that a couple of these analogies usually stick and help, but if there's some other way to clarify that, happy to do it afterwards.
I just want to say I love the English language analogy. Like it is really spot on. So basically, just to summarize, like Dipti shared this with me a few weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. Essentially, you as a merchant, you desire doing business with, let's say, Walmart, Target, just list out the big box retailer that you're attracted to. And what they're saying is we use this EDI protocol to communicate back and forth. All the different big box retailers, they're communicating with merchants using the same protocol, just like businesses around the world agree to use English to communicate. And like whenever you explain that, that's the easiest way I've ever heard to articulate EDI technology and how it helps businesses grow.
Yeah, I'll echo that, Dipti. It made so much sense and really brought the whole idea together for me. And Josh, you kind of transition us really well talking about how EDI works. Let's Dipti, do you want to dive a little more into the whole process of how it all works out?
Yeah, sounds good. And I'll try to keep it at a high level. And if folks have questions, please let us know. But in terms of the application of the standard, right, is really it's a means to an end. It is ultimately to enable two businesses to transact with each other, to communicate with each other, and in the process exchange data with each other, right? How does that work now? Now EDI can be leveraged in multiple ways, right? Like there's applications for it in the TMS world, as an example, right? Even in the broader kind of context of commerce and things like that. For the purpose of this webinar, we've sort of scoped it to looking at how it's relevant in terms of a brand, a manufacturer, a wholesaler, when they're doing business, with a retailer, whether it's brick and mortar or online or a distributor, right? So in this example, imagine you're a apparel company, for example, and you're working with Target. And you've gone through sort of the offline process of getting into Target, which is already a very big accomplishment and a big hurdle to have overcome, right? Then they effectively say in some shape or form that, hey, you must kind of meet our vendor compliance requirements, right? Those are usually the keywords that they might say, or your broker might say, for example, as you're getting into something like a Target. And essentially that is sort of where Crstl comes into the picture, right? Is to really enable that vendor compliance. At its heart, that is the reason Crstl exists. And then of course, as the operations scale, inevitably you're using something like a Syn 7 core and you're looking to scale your automation, et cetera, then those extend the capabilities of our product and the integration into as an example, is in Syn 7 core, right? But to summarize kind of the transaction aspect of it, Target, for example, will send a purchase order to the brand, and at least in the context of Crstl, right? Like this is where we've already standardized everything, we've normalized everything, so that when that PO comes to you, you can simply focus on the particulars of that PO, right? What's contained in it, what's been ordered, when is it expected by, and what you must do to fulfill it, right? So those are kind of the key kind of core details there. The acknowledgement tends to be a step in sort of pulling on that English language analogy. The rules kind of are a little bit different depending on the retailer. And actually, even within the retailer, depending on the fulfillment or replenishment type, there might be variations, right? So the acknowledgement is a good example of that. For example, Target wholesale does not expect an acknowledgement back from the brand, but if you are a Target DVS, a dropship vendor, they expect acknowledgement, right? And I'll try to sort of explain all of this without sort of introducing Crstl sort of too much, just to keep those two a little bit separate. But while we're on the topic, one of the many things we do at Crstl is we take care of that, knowing kind of what those rules are, so you don't have to worry about it. You as the brand, the manufacturer, don't have to worry about it. Meaning, we already study all these rules and already kind of build the automation and the intelligence and the rule engine, so that you don't need to ask yourself in the midst of fulfilling an order, do I have to send an acknowledgement or not, right? If we know that Target wholesale doesn't need it, it doesn't even appear in the UI. With Target dropship, we know it's needed, a few, so we introduce it, right? And so on. And then the acknowledgement step is really kind of where, it's the heart, the ship notice, which is the next step, is really sort of the heart of all of this, right? Because this is the rubber meets the road, if you will, in terms of the product actually getting, sort of sent to the customer, in this case, the retailer, the distributor. There's a lot of details here, everything from unit of measure to, right? Like with unit of measure is relevant because maybe the PO is ordering in, cases, but maybe the shipment needs to be going out in packs, right? Just because of the rules set forth by the retailer. Depending on whether it's a dropship order, there might be branded packing slips to think about. There will be GS1 labels to think about, right? So really kind of the ship notice is really where it all comes together. And then for the purpose of this example, kind of the workflow terminates once the invoice has been sent to the retailer, right? Like once the simple version of the workflow is once the goods have left the warehouse, then the team can send an invoice to the B2B customer in this example, right? And so that's sort of the gist of the process. There's a lot of nuances and variations based on the product category, based on the retailer's requirements, based on the fulfillment replenishment type, and so on. But again, yeah, at a high level, that's the flow. And in case as you will quickly find out, I'm a huge fan of analogies. And one analogy I'll throw here is this actually looks very similar to when you're ordering food from your favorite food app, right? Food delivery app, which is, you place an order. I mean, it's a little bit different there. There's 3 parties involved between the restaurant, the courier, and you. But from the restaurant's perspective, it's actually a little bit similar, right? Where they're receiving an order, and then you, as the consumer, get a notification back on your app, which is effectively an acknowledgement saying, yep, the restaurant is, cooking your meal. And then you get another notification saying your courier is on the way, right? So there's some light sort of parallels to that, even in the kind of more consumer context, if you will. So, because it's all about goods and money changing hands at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's another great analogy. I mean, really, the concepts of what this EDI protocol offers to these big box retailers, actually, when you boil them down to the fundamentals, it's exactly how you would engage with the brand if you were on the phone or just emailing back and forth. It's just that these big box retailers, they're so big and they have so many vendors that they're working with that they must standardize it so that everybody that's involved knows exactly the rules of the game. And every single big box retailer plays the game slightly differently. And really, a solution like Crstl, they understand all the rules, so you don't have to think about them. Just like Dipti was giving the example of, Target wholesale versus Target dropship, slightly different rules to engage with that area of Target, but Crstl is an application that understands those rules. So all you have to do is think about, as the merchant, I want to sell my goods through this channel, and I need to build a relationship. I'll use this system, this protocol, in order to communicate with them. And then you're in a position where all you have to worry about is your inventory, completing the orders, making sure the quality of your products are strong, and you're, staying in line with what your customers want. And the solution will take care of all the things that are not a good use of your time. Okay, so now hopefully you have a good understanding of EDI and how it's used in this business landscape, how it benefits you. And imagine at this point you've identified 5 different big box retailers. Let's say you're a fashion brand and you've identified these are the 5 retailers where I feel my products would do very well. Using a system like Crstl, you're going to become EDI compliant. And that is something that's going to be incredibly important to those retailers. Showing up on their doorstep and saying, I want to sell my goods at your store, is one thing. But saying, I'm EDI compliant, I already have the infrastructure to engage with you in a business relationship, and I'm ready to go, that's going to mean a lot more to the retailer, and they're going to take you much more seriously. You're actually positioned and ready to begin this business relationship and actually beginning the transactions. Now, that's wonderful. You've gotten to that stage. That's great. The next stage is, how are you going to handle the actual orders? So imagine right now you're selling through Shopify, Amazon, and other online marketplaces. You've been doing everything yourself. You have warehouses set up, and you're able to process X number of orders per day, and your entire team is accustomed to that. Whenever you start engaging with the big box retailers, and this is what you want, but when you start engaging with those retailers, the size of the orders that they're going to begin sending you are going to be multiples of what you are likely accustomed to today. And that introduces a lot of different business challenges. Like number one, in order to fulfill those orders, I need my inventory to be stored somewhere. And maybe you only have enough warehouse space for what you're doing today, plus a little bit more. Maybe the resources that you have on your team can handle the amount of orders that are coming through today. Maybe they're really good at shipping these consumer packages through UPS, but you know, creating a pallet of goods is not something they are prepared to do. Maybe you don't have a forklift and you're not ready to start moving these pallets around in your warehouse. In that case, one of the things that you should consider is working with a 3PL. So a 3PL, which stands for third-party logistics. 3PLs are organizations that have their own warehouses and they have their own staff, and their teams are trained on receiving orders and fulfilling those orders as rapidly as possible and fulfilling various types of orders. So a 3PL may be good at shipping those UPS boxes. They may also be good at shipping pallets of goods. They might even help you fill containers and move those containers over to other locations across the country. The 3PL, think of them as an outsourced warehouse that you can rely on. So if you're in a situation where you have EDI up and running, and now you're able to do business with these big box retailers, the other piece of this is thinking about the actual fulfillment of those orders. That's where 3PL comes in. And Dipti, I'll let you go into more detail about how the two are related.
Yeah, no, that's a great summary, Josh. So yeah, I mean, some of the considerations, right? Basically, once you are now getting ready to serve B2B customers, typically it does take a while to, particularly in a case where a brand is working on landing kind of that very first retail relationship. It takes a while, right? And typically during those months, what we see folks doing is evaluating the capabilities of their existing 3PL if they're working with one, to ensure that they're able to support B2B customers, right? Like in the last couple of years, for example, we've definitely seen a rise of 3PLs telling us that, hey, didn't really have to think about B2B capabilities as much, but more and more of our customers are asking for it, right? And that's in line with sort of some of the macro kind of shifts that we've been observing for a while. So you want to make sure that your 3PL is actually capable of picking, packing, and shipping to send the product to the B2B customer in accordance to the rules, right? Like effectively, there's a lot of rules to abide by, and you want to make sure that from an operational excellence perspective, from a standard operating procedure, discipline, et cetera perspective, that your 3PL is capable. Obviously, we're technologists here, but we would highly suggest that in addition to cost and service, which of course from the brand's perspective probably are and should be the most important things, we would highly encourage you to make sure that these 3PLs are at sort of tech forward, right? Because ultimately that kind of plays a role into the cost and the service that you get. Sometimes it seems as though those assessments are done separately, or maybe the consideration may or may not be holistic. Because cost, rightfully so, is at the forefront in the selection criteria. But the tech forward aspect of it does become a real challenge when your business starts to scale, or even if you want to understand visibility on the billing side of things. There's many different pieces for why you want to make sure that they can first and foremost support the customers, the B2B customers that you're looking to work with, right? But also them being tech forward just has a lot of benefits from an efficiency perspective, from an automation perspective. And then the decision is, do you want to have 3 part-time people on your team managing the, 3PL? Or do you have, one person where maybe half their time is spent on that and the rest of the team is focused on actually growing the business, right? And I can't emphasize that enough, because at this point in 2025, some of this potentially almost sounds like a cliche, but we see kind of the the downsides of sort of over optimizing on any one dimension, and kind of the impact that has on the ability of a business to grow. And I think I'm probably not the best person suited for this particular topic, but I think there are a number of different folks out there, communities, et cetera, that can help with the appropriate third-party 3PL selection.
Dipti and Josh, I think you kind of went around this topic, so maybe at just a very high level, can you explain how 3PL works? I feel like we maybe got it, but just again as a wrap up for 3PL.
Yeah, I can cover this real quick. So if you engage with Amazon today and you know about Amazon's FBA offering, that's the best analogy. You think about Amazon from an FBA perspective, they are essentially functioning as a 3PL. So you have all of your inventory. You're basically outsourcing the inventory storage and the fulfillment of orders to this external company. You're going to agree with them how much inventory to send. They're going to tell you we have enough room to store this many goods, or maybe you have to negotiate costs for different quantities and so on. But eventually, you're going to ship your goods to their warehouse. They're going to receive it, and then they're going to be responsible for warehousing the goods. And then as orders are coming into you, you're going to forward those orders on to the 3PL when appropriate. It might be that you are fulfilling all of your consumer-oriented orders, and the 3PL is fulfilling all of your B2B orders, just as an example. You can make those arrangements when you build a relationship with the 3PL. But orders are coming into you. The appropriate orders are being forwarded on to the 3PL. The 3PL is not only serving you, but they're serving various other brands. But what they've done is they've developed a system to be efficient and fulfill the orders appropriately for their customers, for you essentially. So the order comes into them, they fulfill the order, you receive a notification letting you know that the order has been fulfilled, and then maybe you're communicating back to the buyer, or you just have it on record that things are on their way. The 3PL is actually shipping the goods, and then your customer will receive those goods in the future. It's like another way to think about it is like drop shipping, essentially. You have someone, it's your goods, you're not reselling somebody else's goods, but there's so many things that a 3PL takes off of your plate. Just like Dipti said, absolutely you can build your own warehouses and you become extremely efficient at fulfilling orders, and maybe from a cost perspective that makes the most sense to you. But if a 3PL can take that off of your workload and you can use that existing energy to focus on marketing and campaigns and product development and reaching more customers, that may be a strategy that helps you grow faster, right? These are all the things that every single person is going to have a different story. Every person listening to this is going to have a different story in a different situation. So you have to figure out what's best for you. But yeah, that's essentially boiled down. That's exactly how those relationships work.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Josh.
Mhm.
So now we've talked about EDI, we've talked about 3PL. Let's talk about how everything works together and, biasly, how it works with Sin7. Can we dive into that and maybe hear about some real life customer examples if you have them?
Yeah. Okay, I can explain how it works, how all these different technologies and systems work together. So you as the merchant, you're using, in this case, Sin7 as essentially the backbone of your business. So Sin7 functions as your operating system for the operations of your business. You're using it to manage inventory, you're using it for purchase orders, sales orders, If you produce your own goods, you're using it for manufacturing. You manage your vendors and customers inside the system. So it's the one place that your entire team can go and number one, do their job, but it's also a repository for all business transactions. Everything lives inside of that one system. When you introduce EDI and 3PL to the mix, what you end up with is it's almost like a triangle of connections, right? So in this case, you have now a big box retailer. The big box retailer is submitting their purchase orders to you through EDI. Those purchase orders are landing inside of Syn7. Syn7 is recognizing, this is the kind of order that our 3PL is going to fulfill. And then Syn7 is going to send that order to the 3PL's order management system. They're going to fulfill the order. They're going to send back a notification to you that this has been taken care of. And then EDI is going to pick up on that shipment receipt, and then it will let the big box retailer know this shipment's on the way. It's going to show up at your warehouse on this date, right? So these systems are all talking to each other. Now, Dipti, you've been through many of these implementations. You could probably name 5 or 10 other scenarios and different connections between the 3 technologies, but that's in a nutshell how these technologies work together. Syn7's the backbone, and then EDI and 3PL are systems that are going to help you grow while you continue to manage the backbone in Syn7. And then as far as customers, Lauren brings up a good point. Dipti, do you have any customers, like, are there great stories that you can share about, we met this merchant when they were at X number of dollars and they implemented these systems and now they're at Y dollars, or any great stories?
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of these examples. I mean, without sort of specific name reveals, if you will, we actually, for example, have a really awesome brand that is doing it's doing like a modern like a cooler version of gummy bears, right? And they came to us when they were blowing up on direct to consumer. They had just landed a distributor, and they just had a certain vision for their company and brand ethos, et cetera, and they felt like some of the things that made Crstl attractive to them felt like it was a really good fit with that sort of kind of very forward-looking ethos. They started with one, and at the time they also I think added a 3PL. They decided to keep the existing one for their direct-to-consumer business, and then added another one for their B2B customers. And I think in less than 6 months, they added 7 more B2B customers. In the meantime, also upgrading their operating systems along the lines that Josh, you described. And so we see these examples, quite a bit. And I think perhaps the common aspect that we see with these retailers, with these brands and manufacturers that have sort of grown like that, is we see a direct positive correlation between the investment they make in operational excellence and in thoughtfully picking sort of solutions, tech and service solutions for their business, and their growth, right? Because it is probably a proxy for or an indicator for how they probably make decisions in other parts of their business, perhaps. But yeah, we have tons of examples, but perhaps my current favorite example is the gummy bear company that's blown up.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree. The comment that you made about the technology and making the wisest decisions around the tech that you actually need in order to be successful, rather than like, obviously cost is very important, but cost should never dictate the path that you take. And when it comes to 3PL, I'll just use 3PL as an example very quickly. Syn7's building relationships with various 3PL vendors. And what's important to us is we want to make sure that our integrations to those 3PLs are solid. That data needs to be flowing through that stream smoothly without error, because as you begin to work with these big box retailers, there's less tolerance for mistakes. Like big box retailers, they want items to show up on a specific day. You with consumers, you can say 2-day shipping or overnight shipping, and they have flexibility. Most times, consumers have some level of flexibility. Big box retailers are a little more strict about that. So from Sin7's perspective, we know, okay, our customers are going to have really important orders that are coming in through EDI. We need to get those orders over to the 3PL without error, and we need to get notifications back into the big box retailer so that this relationship stays strong for the customers. So we're going out and talking to all these different 3PLs, and it's the same situation. The ones that take technology very seriously, the ones that are using, the best modern tech in the market today, they're the strongest 3PLs. There's a lot of 3PLs that have been around for decades, and they have their systems in place, but they're using homegrown technology that is very difficult to integrate with. Maybe their APIs are weak, whatever it may be. And these are questions that, as a merchant, these are questions that we would recommend you spend time focusing on as you talk to these different brands. And if you're an existing Sin7 customer and you're thinking about going down this path, reach out to us and we can share with you insights about who we're working with and who we've seen success with as far as the 3PLs. Some 3PLs focus on very specific industries, like this 3PL focuses on CPG products, this one focuses on fashion. These are the kinds of details that we can share with you to help you find the best partner for this.
Yeah, Josh, what I'm hearing a lot of, and I think what you and Dipti have really hit the nail on the head on, is that like in this scenario, if your business is looking to grow, you're looking for products or companies that can support you in doing that, right? So like you're saying that we can help with picking out a 3PL, like this actually really transitions well into our next slide and one of the last slides that we have. But preparing for scalable growth and having good tips and understandings of how to do that. And so I wondered if we could all go through these together just really quick, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. And if you have any questions, you can start popping them into the chat. I see a couple of them in here. I promise we will get to you. But let's go through some of these and just touch on Dipti and Josh, what your opinions are in terms of preparing for, hopefully, unlimited growth. So the first one is assess your current systems. I think we've kind of talked on this and being aware of the technologies that you need, but do either of you have something you want to add here? The answer could be no.
No. I would say this is often an overlooked exercise. So when I meet business leaders, every single merchant I've ever met, and it's been thousands of them, every single one of them, typically they can close their eyes and they can see the operations of their organization and how information flows through the organization. Which teams talk to which teams and how do they handle certain situations and so on. The thing is, a lot of times merchants assume that the way that they're doing things is exactly the same as how hundreds of other businesses do things. Every business is slightly unique. And the more of that operational information that you can get down on paper or be able to articulate to others, the better position you will be as you go out and build relationships with these different vendors. The better you are at mapping out how information flows through your company and how things actually get done, it'll be easier for your technology partners or even consultants to get their head wrapped around how things work with your business and then be able to give you wise advice. So it's really worth your time to sit down with a whiteboard and sketch out, this is how we operate.
Yeah, I will really second that. I mean, we get on quite a few calls, with customers, obviously when they're very early in their cycle, and kind of a theme we see is that they, just to put it very plainly, it's unfortunate that they don't seem to understand their own business really well. And in this macro climate, it is particularly important to get very serious about that. And investing in operational excellence is the second point on the slide, is really the one that I will, really sort of urge everybody to take very, very seriously. And because a lot of the downstream steps kind of flow out of that, right? Like that, those are kind of an outcome of having kind of understood your current systems and really understanding your business and taking operational excellence very seriously. And if I may, not to put anyone on the spot, but I see Stan Ward is on the call, and I really want to give him a shout out. We've been working with him, and he's done kind of what remains by far my favorite sort of exercise on just going very, very detailed for his clients on mapping out the business, mapping out the tools, and really taking kind of a holistic lens. And particularly when you're at scale or aspire to get to scale, investing in that sort of mindset early on. And if that's kind of not your thing, then get help. There are communities that exist. There are experts like Stan in the context of the Sin7 community that exists, for example. And I think that can really help. That will help you as the brand and the manufacturer as you're scaling. So yeah, really want to second what Josh said here, and please take operational excellence very, very seriously.
Yeah, and I kind of think from 3 down, that's been the bulk of the webinar, which is maybe the best part of this. But right, leveraging 3PL for fulfillment, implementing EDI, and then making sure that you have this system and that everything is working together is kind of the meat and potatoes of this. So unless Josh or Dipti, you have anything else you want to add off of this, we could move into the Q&A portion. Is that okay? Great.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So we have a couple questions that came in. So one of the questions, and it may be specific to this person, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you cover the option for Amazon vendor 1P EDI options? And they put in parentheses, not the same as an Amazon seller.
Yeah. Actually, Dipti, there's a good chance you're going to know more about this than me. So why don't you take this one?
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, the answer to the kind of the high level answer to this question is pretty much any solution provider that supports EDI for a B2B customer should be able to support with Amazon vendor as well. And that distinction, which is not as Amazon seller, makes sense in the context of the 1P versus 3P, right? So, do your homework. I mean, there's a lot of different solutions, but really sort of understand their capabilities, really understand. The other thing that I will emphasize, if point number one is, if one takeaway is EDI is not a technology, is a protocol. If takeaway number two is please invest in operational excellence and take that very seriously. Sort of the takeaway number three, I will say, is please understand the total cost of ownership when you're picking any solution, right? Whether it is picking, an ERP, whether it's picking a EDI platform, whether it's picking a 3PL, it's really important to understand total cost of ownership for any of these aspects. And that effectively means it is not just kind of what number a solution provider may show you, but any of the unforeseen costs either levied by them or by other aspects like, oh, you didn't realize that they only give you a part of the solution, and then you have to go find another vendor to kind of plug gaps and holes in their solution, right? And that happens more often than I would like to see. So anyway, so digressing over there a little bit, but the high level answer is pretty much any company that supports B2B customers should also be able to support Amazon vendor.
Yeah. So just for those that may not be aware, Amazon has many different ways that you can sell products through Amazon. There is Amazon Seller Central, where you agree that, or you're going to post your products on Amazon.com, orders come in, and you as the merchant fulfill those orders. That's called FBM. There's also a scenario where you ship your inventory to Amazon. Amazon receives orders through Amazon.com, and they fulfill the orders for you. That's called FBA. And when Amazon warehouses and fulfills orders for you, they take extra fees out of the transaction. So you don't have to pay them anything up front. You just ship the inventory to them and they collect payment through the transaction itself. There's a totally separate Amazon Vendor Central relationship that you can find yourself in. And imagine you sell a consumer packaged good and Amazon recognizes that this particular product is doing incredibly well on Amazon and they want to keep those orders coming in as much as possible. Amazon may want to build a relationship with you where instead of you shipping them inventory or you fulfilling one by one orders, Amazon just reaches out to you and says, we want you to ship us 10,000 units of product X because we recognize that it's doing very well. We'll help advertise that product. We will sell it on your behalf. Then it's just a B2B relationship. Then Amazon becomes one of your customers and you're selling goods to them, and it's on them to actually sell and fulfill those orders. I think that's three of probably, there's several more ways that you can do business with Amazon, but those are, from my experience, those are the three most popular. There's also Amazon B2B, which they have Amazon Business, which is a marketplace specifically for businesses buying from other businesses. And if you own a business and you have an EIN number, you can set up an account with Amazon Business, and you can actually buy goods from other businesses. You can negotiate customer-specific pricing and so on. You as a business can also sell on Amazon B2B, just like you do with Amazon.com today.
That was, I think, a very thorough answer between the two of you, so that felt good. A question that came up in a different conversation, but I think is valuable here. Can we just talk about how long it takes to implement EDI and 3PL?
Yeah, I can take the EDI part. Sorry, by EDI 3PL, so I'll aim to break it down in a couple ways. On the EDI side, I will speak for Crstl because there is variation both in the claims and in the reality of implementation. But typically, if you are looking to get stood up, right, with a new trading partner, you're new to them, you just got in, you're expecting purchase orders from them in some period of time. On the Crstl side, typically that SLA is 2 weeks. We've definitely done it faster than that. We've seen some cases where it's taken a bit longer than that. And the simple reason for that is because it is it's actually a 4-way coordination between you, the brand, Crstl, right, in this example as your EDI platform, the retailer itself, and they often have their own EDI backend, right? Meaning in this example, like Crstl is the brand's EDI backend. The retailer may have chosen another company to be their backend, right? So actually onboarding is usually kind of a four-party sort of coordination there. And on the retailer side, right, like they all have varying sophistication in their processes. I mean, we know that there are some retailers where literally the way they will manage the go live dates is it is on somebody's internal work calendar to be like, flip the switch for this customer, flip the switch for this customer, flip the switch for this customer, right? Which is point being that it's a manual process. And if that person happened to be on vacation that day, they'll be like, oops, I actually forgot to flip on the switch and go live here. It's going to happen the next day, right? And we've seen that happen as well. So typically on our side, 2 weeks is something that we feel pretty comfortable communicating. And if there are changes or delays to that is usually pretty apparent in the process. And it is also, the case that sometimes from one brand to the next for the same retailer, that exact same time frame may not be sort of repeatable, right? Because sometimes what may happen is a brand may say, well, I actually haven't fully finished my onboarding process with the retailer themselves in order for the EDI onboarding to kick off, right? So you just want to be aware of all of those different dependencies. But that's a very long way of saying, from a Crstl perspective, for any given trading partner, we feel pretty comfortable with the 2-week SLA between the time you tell us, the contracts have been signed, et cetera, and ready to kick things off, till when that first purchase order could land. Right? And then in terms of the 3PL, that can vary, because Sin 7, for example, has, I think, Josh, right? Like, I think you guys may have your own versions of the 3PL integrations. We have our own versions of it, and it makes sense for each company to build out their ecosystem on that front. But maybe, Josh, I'll let you take the 3PL part as it comes to Sin 7.
Yeah, so if we imagine those different connections, Sin 7 is going to be the backbone it's kind of your source of truth, right? So that all these Crstl would connect directly to it, and then your 3PL would connect directly to it. I have seen scenarios where Crstl connects to the 3PLs directly, but there's business benefits to just using Sin 7 as your source of truth. Getting an integration up and running with a 3PL, it's not a universal answer, because we need to understand the state in which the 3PL is in today. Is there a pre-existing integration? Do they have strong APIs? Do we have customers that are working together today? And so on. With the 3PLs that we've built relationships with, and we've taken many customers live, those implementations are quick. I wouldn't want to commit to a specific timeline, but I can say that they are quick. And just like Dipti said with EDI, the implementation time is spent essentially testing. You get you get Sin 7 connected to that 3PL's warehouse management system, and then you run through various tests to make sure that data is flowing the way that you would expect it to, and then you agree with the 3PL that we're going to go live on X date. There are many instances when merchants come to us and they have a 3PL that they've been working with for years, and it's an organization we've never heard of before. So it takes a little bit of time for us, or more likely one of our partners, to spend time with that 3PL and understanding how are we going to send data to and from the organization, and how are we going to establish the connection. And typically the 3PL, they have their own standardized way for doing that. So whoever's implementing the system is going to have to learn that methodology and help them get it up and running for the customer.
Okay, so it looks like we have a couple questions left. Thank you both so far for answering these questions. I think this has been really helpful. One question is in regards to budget. So the question is, how much should one budget to implement an EDI? And the other is 3PL specific, and understanding how 3PL, how to get in contact with 3PL references that Sin 7 is partnered with. So let's start with the budget for implementing EDI. Dipti, is that one that you want to take?
Yeah. The answer for this one also is it depends. What does it depend on? It depends on how many trading partners we're talking about. It depends on the volume, right? Either expected, or maybe there are some historical references. So in the case of Crstl, we do a lot of migrations from other platforms to Crstl, and so usually customers have historical data around that, and not that the past always represents the future, but to the extent that it serves as a baseline, it's useful. It also depends on what integrations for automation and scale that one is looking to do, right? Whether you're looking to integrate with, say, a Sin 7 or a QuickBooks or Shopify or any number of WMSs out there. And I will also plus one kind of Josh's previous point here is there's a fair bit of variation in the testing process, even on the 3PL side. At Crstl, we ourselves see that our ability to integrate between our systems and that of a given 3PL can vary from one afternoon to a month, right? And it is entirely a function.
Even a month is fast.
Yeah,
Even a month is fast.
Even a month, yeah, just for one trading partner. But yeah, you're right. Even a month sometimes can feel fast, but truly that's the level of variation that we see. But yeah, the answer on the budget is, those are some of the factors. But I will repeat this, and so hopefully it really sticks. Is please take the total cost of ownership into account, right? I mentioned earlier we do a fair bit of migrations. Number one reason why that happens is because companies didn't understand kind of what their full cost of ownership was going to be, right? They rushed, they signed something, they got attracted by the low dollar amount, only to find out that now they have to go find another human to plug in certain gaps. They have to go find another vendor to plug in other set of gaps, whether on mapping or GS1 labels or what have you. So the budget question is rather incomplete, without taking into kind of an understanding of the question should be, what is the total cost of ownership, right? The budget, and then the budget is a function of really, it's like walking into a store and are you buying, one t-shirt, or are you buying 10 t-shirts and 10 pants or whatever it might be, right? So it depends.
Yeah, I that's my least favorite story to hear. And unfortunately, Dipti's right. That story happens way too often. Another thing, when you're thinking about budget, think about the EDI technology that you are investing in as a cost associated with the goal of selling a high volume to these particular customers, right? So if you're a consumer-oriented brand today and you're used to processing, let's say 10,000 orders a week, that's fantastic. 10,000 orders per week, and maybe every box has 2 items. That's 20,000 units of goods. If you're building a relationship with a big box retailer, they may increase that by an order of 20,000 units per month, and that may be standard for them. But in order to play the game, you have to invest in a technology that makes it possible for you to communicate with the big box retailer. So just think about that as part of your costs. So for every unit that you're selling to the retailer, there are fees associated with each of those unit sales, and the EDI connection just gets divided into all of those different units, and it becomes in my opinion, a relatively small cost for the gain of the investment of moving in this direction. Yeah, so I'll stop there.